Thank you, Member. Member for Victoria Beacon Hill.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, Honourable Speaker. It's my pleasure to stand and rise to speak to the budget. 2014, I just wish it was a better budget to speak to. I wish it was as much of a pleasure to be able to talk about the items that were in the budget as it is to rise in this House. I want to take a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, to talk about the fact that throne speeches and budgets are really a way of a government laying out their priorities. They're the opportunity for a government to be able to put out their choices that they're making. And we've all heard the members on the other side, Honourable Chair, talk about choices, that the budget is about choices. And that's really what a budget and a throne speech that we heard a week ago do. This is also, Honourable Chair, the first opportunity for this government to put out a full budget and a full throne speech since they were elected. And so I think many of us, and certainly the public that I talk to, really believe that this would have been the opportunity for this government to put out their new ideas, to be able to lay out their new approaches, and certainly to be able to build on the strengths of our province and put forward their ideas to deal with the challenges that we face. And so I want to take a minute just to look at those strengths and challenges before I get into how I saw the budget addressing or not addressing those issues. And also to talk a little bit about the concerns that I hear from my community. Because although we all come from unique places in British Columbia, there are some areas that are common to the people of this province that I think we'll hear in other speeches as we go through this budget. So to be able to put a plan together to address the challenges and to address the strengths of the province, first you have to look at what those are. And I have to say there is a rare place where I would agree with the government in this budget, and that's the issue that people are our greatest strength in British Columbia. There is no question, Honourable Chair, that the public, that the people of British Columbia are our greatest strength, built on the ground of First Nations and Aboriginal people in our province. The most resilient, strong people that we could imagine, and that's a foundation that I'm very proud of and that we should all be proud of in British Columbia. If you take a look at the population of our province, we also need to recognize the extraordinary diversity that we have in British Columbia, which gives us a huge strength, Honourable Chair. A huge strength when it comes to our economy, a huge strength when it comes to connections from across the globe, opportunities for us to be able to have family contacts, cultural contacts, business contacts, that gives us a huge strength. And to me, that is one of the things that I'm so proud to be a British Columbian for, is that multicultural nature of our province, that foundation built by First Nations and Aboriginal people. I think the second thing that probably most of us in this House would agree on, Honourable Chair, is that one of our other greatest strengths is our environment and the world around us in British Columbia. We have every ecosystem you can imagine, Honourable Chair. Whether we're talking about oceans or lakes or streams, whether we're talking about ecosystems. I have the pleasure every summer, one of my ways of relaxing in a job like this is to take off and go camping in the summer. And I'm very fortunate that my husband has spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and so we disappear off the beaten track into forest rec sites and have the opportunity to be able to experience it firsthand. And there is nothing more extraordinary than spending time. Honourable Chair, you want to seek leave?
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for granting me leave. I felt it so important, and I thank you for that. We have some incredibly bright... I apologize. Mr. Speaker, may I have leave to make an introduction, please?
Is the leave granted?
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for granting me leave. I felt it was important, and I apologize for the interruption, is that we have a whole bunch of very bright grade 5 students from my riding of Surrey Tynehead, from the Pacific Academy, from the class of Rick Bath and Nancy Backett. We have a whole bunch of grade 5, 54 grade 5 students are coming in from Pacific Academy, and these are our future university students. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to make the introduction.
Member for Victoria Beacon Hill, continue, please.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, and thank you to the member, the minister, for doing introductions of young people. As we're talking about the strengths of our province, I think we would all agree that our future is in great hands when we all, as MLAs, spend time in our schools and meeting with young people around this province. I certainly feel confident, so it's nice to see some young people here today visiting. I was mentioning the strengths of British Columbia, and as I said, I think our natural environment and the world around us is certainly one of the greatest strengths that I recognize as a British Columbian. I think the other piece that's important to acknowledge as one of our strengths are the natural resources of British Columbia. They have really built our province. They have provided the wealth that we see around us each day, whether we're talking about forestry, whether we're talking about mining, agriculture, the fishing industry, although a challenge, has certainly been one of those areas that has helped build this province and a part of our history, and I hope, Honourable Chair, part of our future. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about this budget and how this budget related to those particular areas. We also see not only strengths in British Columbia, but some real challenges. And I think the first one that I want to speak about, Honourable Chair, is the issue of inequality. We are, as a province, more economically divided than we have been in generations. And I just want to read a couple of statistics because I think it's important for us to acknowledge this as a major challenge, because it impacts not simply the families and people who are struggling with that inequality. It impacts all of us. It impacts the economy for all British Columbians. We have the largest income gap in the country right here in British Columbia. Just to give you an example, the last statistic came out in 2009. The top 20% in British Columbia held 44.8% of the after-tax income. The bottom 20% lived on 4% of the after-tax income. We know that the middle class are increasingly under stress, Honourable Chair. We know, and again, I'll speak a little bit more about this later, but we know as well that again this year, we have the highest child poverty rate in this country. We have the highest rate for children living in single mother families in poverty. 49.8%, almost 50% of single mother families have their children and their families, therefore, because children don't live alone, those are families living in poverty, struggling in our province. The rate for children living in two-parent families, people often think it's simply single-parent families that struggle. The rate of poverty for children living in two-parent families is the worst in Canada here in British Columbia, 14%. And the rate for children under 6 years old, again, the worst here in British Columbia, 20%, 8% higher than Canada's average. Another indicator that's often looked at, Honourable Chair, is the use of food banks in our province. 94,000 people use food banks every single month in British Columbia. And what are the numbers for children? 1/3 of those users are children. That's a statistic that I would imagine, if you were looking, Honourable Chair, at a budget and preparing a budget and looking at how you address the challenges that you face in British Columbia, that inequality and poverty would be top of the list to address, not simply, as I said, because it's the right thing to do and because those families are struggling, but because it's the right economic thing to do. Because inequality is tough for economies for everyone, not simply for the people living in poverty. So let's look at our economy. Because again, as I talk about the challenges we face in British Columbia, our rate of employment and our economy is struggling. And these aren't New Democrat statistics, Honourable Chair. These are statistics that are out there from Statistics Canada, from the government's own progress board, from their own budget documents, and I'll get to that as well. When we look at private sector job growth, which, as everyone knows in this House, Honourable Chair, is one of the drivers when you look at employment, you look at economic growth. From September 2011 to January 2014, and that actually fits the time period of the Premier's jobs plan, interestingly enough, and again, I'll get to that a little bit more, were the worst in Canada. The worst in Canada. We have the lowest employment rate west of the Maritimes. We have the highest unemployment rate of all the Western provinces. We have the lowest GDP growth among Western provinces. And we've also had a net loss of people to other provinces for 9 consecutive quarters. That's 27 months, Honourable Chair. You would certainly think that the issue of employment and economic growth, if you were a government and you were looking at bringing forward a budget that set out the direction for the province, that would be a main feature of the budget. We'll get to that in a minute, Honourable Chair. Another huge challenge for individuals and for families in British Columbia, and I certainly see it in my community office, and I'm sure other MLAs do as well, is the issue of affordability. I have never had, Honourable Chair, so many individuals coming into my community office as I have had this fall with concerns about being able to manage paycheck to paycheck. Individuals who are struggling to try and make tough decisions that they shouldn't have to make. Senior citizens who are trying to decide, do I just stretch out the prescription that I've got and the medication that I've got because I can't afford it when we're paying other bills? We've seen since 2001 increases in ferry fares, in tuition fees, in MSP premiums, in hydro rates, in childcare costs. Impacts that aren't simply words, but have an impact on families, Honourable Chair. One of the most important roles of government, I believe, is to care for the most vulnerable. I'm a big believer in the statement that a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. And I have to say, Honourable Chair, that I've been pretty ashamed with what I've seen in my province of British Columbia over the last number of years. When I take a look at the reports that have come forward from the Representative for Children and Youth, when I take a look at children in care who, by no fault of their own, are in the care of government, and what could be more important than the role that government takes on in being their caregiver, the guardian, the parents, the family, for children when they need support. It's a serious role, Honourable Chair. And it's a role that government plays for many, many children at different times in their lives in British Columbia. And yet, if we take a look at the record over the last 12 years, Honourable Chair, it's dismal. The government has not been doing the job that they are required to do as guardian and family for those children. They've not been providing the kinds of supports that they need as they transition to adulthood. They've not been providing that kind of support for adults with diverse abilities who, again, need that support and require that support. And people who are living on disabilities and income assistance. You know, I often think, Honourable Chair, that the other side thinks it's a handout that people are looking for. And people aren't looking for a handout, Honourable Chair. They're looking for a hand up. They're looking for someone to give them a little bit of assistance when they're doing everything right. And were there things in this budget to assist there? No. I have a large population, Honourable Chair, of seniors in my community in Victoria Beacon Hill. And seniors, as we know, and I won't make any comment about all of us around this chamber, Honourable Chair, but seniors is a growing population base. Seniors are individuals who help build British Columbia, who shared their resources. The member across says there are a couple of young folks in the chamber. Yes, that's true, behind me as well. I want the member to know, behind me as well. Seniors have, with their tax base and with their hard work, helped build our province. And again, seniors are not looking for a handout. They're looking for supports in their years as they need them, which means a range of supports. So given those concerns, given those areas that are of concern in British Columbia, and given our strengths, Honourable Chair, let's take a look at Budget 2014 and see how it measured up. How did it address those things that I believe a government should address? How did they deal with their choices that they had to make? Well, the first piece, of course, is the strength of people. And where were the plans to build on that strength? Starting with First Nations. I heard words in the budget speech. I heard words in the throne speech, Honourable Chair, but I didn't see action. I didn't see action to address the economic growth that First Nations are looking for, government to accept its role in consultation, not simply industry's role, but government also has a legal role to be involved in consultation with First Nations when it comes to resource development. And I didn't see that there, Honourable Chair. I didn't see support for what I think could have been a great opportunity with an education program for skills training specifically for First Nations communities. A lot of the growth, a lot of the economic activity, as we know, Honourable Chair, that will take place in British Columbia will take place in communities that have a large Aboriginal population. There is an opportunity for government to be able to ensure that First Nations have full participation. And I was hoping to see a specific training program to address that issue, to be able to provide opportunities for First Nations. I didn't see any of that in the budget, Honourable Chair. Where was the opportunity and the plan to ensure that all of the public, all of our citizens, benefit and have an opportunity to contribute in British Columbia? We could have begun, Honourable Chair, with a province-wide poverty reduction plan. A very specific direction where we could have come together, government and opposition and community organizations, to say what could be more important than addressing the shameful poverty rate in British Columbia, and let's put a plan together to address it. This is not something that will be fixed overnight, Honourable Chair. There's not a quick fix nor one fix to the issue of poverty reduction. But somehow government seems to believe that because it's complex and because it covers other sectors and because it needs to be a community and a government partnership, we're not going to do anything. Well, that's simply not good enough, Honourable Chair. The children and the families who are struggling and who want to participate in the economy and the life of British Columbia deserve better than they're getting in this budget. We need to ensure that families have an opportunity for that success. And we have seen governments of different political stripes across this country put poverty reduction plans in place. This is not something that is unique. This is something, in fact, that is unique to our province, not having done it. And so I once again will ask the members opposite to think about how we could look at putting together that poverty plan. It could include all kinds of strategies like a childcare system for British Columbia. I don't know how the government expects families to contribute to the economy of our province and to get back into the workforce when they're looking at $1,200 a month, for example, as childcare costs. And I hear the minister, when he stood up and talked about the budget, to say that next year there'll be a child tax credit support coming to families. Some of them will get $55 a month for children under 6. Well, $55 a month when you're paying $1,200 a month for childcare is not going to support a family returning to the workplace. It's not going to encourage people to be able to get out of the cycle of poverty, which is what they're looking for. We could have seen an investment, Honourable Chair, in affordable housing, a range of market and co-op housing. And again, Honourable Chair, we didn't see that in this budget. We could have seen some changes and some supports. I heard the Minister for Social Development speaking earlier, but we could have seen some changes and supports in the rules, the archaic rules in many cases, that are in place in the area of income assistance. If you're a single mom and you're going back to school, you get cut off income assistance and get cut off your support for your children, for medical, How on earth are you going to get yourself out of the cycle of poverty and go back and get the kind of training that you need and that we keep hearing government talk about if you're told you're cut off all of your supports? It makes it impossible, Honourable Chair, for families to do what they want to do, which is get that training, get that post-secondary support, and get back into the workplace. I didn't see anything in this budget that talked about that, Honourable Chair. I talked about the environment being one of our greatest strengths and our natural resources. And where was that great strength supported in the budget? I didn't see it, Honourable Chair. I didn't see support for transit, one of the best things we could take on to address the issue of climate change. And people often think of transit simply as a Lower Mainland issue, but transit is a major issue in communities all across British Columbia, including right here in Greater Victoria, where people are looking for an opportunity for their own transit authority, for their own ability to be able to set direction, to increase transit, to provide an opportunity for people to do their part when it comes to climate change. There could have been an opportunity for the government to not only address the environment, but also to address natural resources and to address jobs by having a major investment in silviculture and reforestation. Wouldn't that have been something to cheer about in the budget document if it had been there, Honourable Chair? Something to actually manage all three of those needed areas in British Columbia. We could have seen a major investment in home retrofits, in both public and private buildings, a chance for people again to be able to address climate change, to put a real plan in place, and to create jobs, green jobs, right here in British Columbia. But we didn't see any of that either, Honourable Chair. I mentioned earlier the issue of inequality and how important it is to address inequality. We don't need another study. We don't need more research to show us that societies with less poverty are safer, are healthier, are more productive, are more economically strong. We will pay as a society. We will pay as taxpayers. We will pay one way or the other, Honourable Chair. And I certainly believe the smarter investment is to put the investment in now to get people out of the cycle of poverty, to be able to give them an opportunity to contribute. That's what they're looking for. Now, if we take a look at jobs, as I mentioned earlier, Honourable Chair, you would think that given the Premier's focus on her jobs plan, that you certainly would have seen that as a big area in the budget. This is the Premier's major plank that she ran in the election on, that she ran before the election on. So you certainly would have expected that there would be action and that there would be success in the budget and that the government would be talking about that. Well, when the public takes a look at this budget document, they will see that the budget document itself, not my words, not the opposition's words, but the government's own words show that unemployment is going to rise in this next year, Honourable Chair. And not only that, it's going to rise the year after as well. What kind of hope is that providing to British Columbians and their families, Honourable Chair? And what's the best tool we can use to be able to address the issue of unemployment, to be able to address people who need skills to be able to get back into the workforce? Well, the very best tool is education and skills training. And so again, Honourable Chair, I expected we'd see a major investment in skills training and trades, a major investment in post-secondary education. I certainly expected that that would be in the budget, Honourable Chair, given the Premier's jobs plan, given the focus that the government has been talking about. But no, Honourable Chair. Not only did they not invest in job training, other than perhaps the advertising budget that the Premier used building into the election, which probably is the only money they've added to the budget, this budget actually cut funding for post-secondary education. It actually cut funding for skills training. We see less people completing trades training in British Columbia. What kind of jobs plan is that, Honourable Chair? Families are looking for opportunities not only for themselves but for their children. I was a school trustee for 12 years, Honourable Chair, and one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking with parents about was the fact that a university degree or trades training were just as valuable as each other. That it was important for people to recognize where their interests were in their children, what kind of direction they wanted to look at, and that one shouldn't be seen as less than the other, that everybody should have an opportunity for that degree and for that trades training and for that opportunity to meet their needs and meet their job needs. Well, now, Honourable Chair, things have changed from my time as a school trustee in the 90s, and I hear many more parents saying they recognize that the trades are important. They understand that there are opportunities out there. They want the chance for their children to be able to get trades training and skilled training. They've been talking to their kids about that in a way they didn't back in the 1990s because they didn't see it as important as a university degree. Well, now that we have families who are looking at both as important, they find out there isn't a space available, there's a wait list to get in, or the costs are prohibitive for them as a family to be able to send their child to school for that kind of training that they need. There was a quote in the budget, Honourable Chair, that really stood out for me. And the quote was, "A student will be virtually guaranteed access to the training opportunity of his or her choice after high school." Well, my question to the Finance Minister and to all of government is how, Honourable Chair? How on earth is a child going to be guaranteed access when the government's cutting the budget for post-secondary, when they're cutting resources for skills training? Yes, I hear the government talk about the capital investment. Well, what is the point of a building without the support to be able to put the students and the teachers in it? It makes no sense, Honourable Chair, no sense whatsoever. So when the government talks about budget being about choices, well, it's about the wrong choices in this budget, Honourable Chair. It's about missed opportunity. Let's take a look at affordability, Honourable Chair, because that's really where this budget hits home for constituents, hits home for members in my community and communities all across this province. How did the government help families who are struggling right now? I talked earlier about the pressures I'm hearing in my community office. Well, this is how the government so-called helped families, Honourable Chair, by increasing the amount of money that they're taking out of their pockets. That's what this budget does, Honourable Chair. It increases their MSP premiums, a medical services tax, as many people are now calling it, because that's really what it is. Increased ferry fares, which really impacts us. Hydro, ICBC rates, tuition, all of those have now gone up for families at a time when they're already struggling, at a time when the government itself admits that unemployment is going up, at a time when we have one of the highest costs of living here in British Columbia. The government's choices didn't include those families. Didn't include those families who are struggling, who want to get out of the cycle of poverty. Did the budget include anything that was going to support those vulnerable families I talked about earlier, Honourable Chair? Those children who are guardians of government? The budget for children and families, Honourable Chair, put additional money in because of increased pressures in the area of autism, but did not increase money to improve services. No money to increase and put in place a plan for youth mental health, as the minister said was going to happen. No increase in residential care, which the minister said was going to happen. No increase in support for those challenged children who need specialized services. That's not going to happen, even though the minister stood up and said so. Report after report after report have come forward from the representative for children and youth, and I have heard the Premier I've heard ministers stand up and say that they're going to support those recommendations, but this budget does not show that, Honourable Chair. And so to close, I'm sad that I have to stand here and raise those issues that aren't included, because I am very proud of this province. I'm an optimist, and I believe that if government had made different choices, we could have seen some of those strengths built on. But instead, Honourable Chair, we have a budget that leaves families paying more, getting less, no support for the vulnerable, and increased costs. And so I will be voting against this budget, Honourable Chair.